Hey, it's Savan and welcome to the channel. If you're new here, I'm a day 1 PvP tank main that specializes in heavy armor, sword and shield, and Warhammer. I love playing heavy armor tanks, warriors, and paladins in all games I play, and I'm excited to bring you this build in New World. So what makes an Omni Tank? There are many tank builds in New World, but what sets mine aside is the balance of high defense, offense, and mobility. We can go from being very tanky with high sustain, providing damage mitigation for ourselves and our team, to quickly pivoting into an offensive juggernaut capable of damage with great battlefield mobility. The beauty of this build is that it is simple, powerful, and can shine in all game modes. Let's start with attributes. 300 strength and 300 con is our stat split. We achieve this with stat food in the form of banana bread and by taking no more than 3 magnify pieces, as any more would teeter-totter our stats into an unfavorable split. The strength tree gives us base damage to our light and heavy attacks, along with some conditional damage increases and stamina regen. The con tree gives us more HP, damage mitigation, resistances, and most importantly, grit. Grit gives us immunity to stagger and knockdowns. For our armor, we are using the heavy mithril plate set with 4 pieces of invigorated, grit ward, and 5 pieces of shirking heels. The armor artifact is the void dark plate, which gives us a permanent 20% armor fortify, ward against basic attacks, and mitigation from ranged physical attacks. Onto our first perk, and one that needs no introduction, Shirking Heels. Shirking Heels has seen a few nerfs and adjustments since the launch of the expansion, and as someone who crafted a full set of Shirking Heels, I also feel the pain. When dodging an attack, we now heal for 3.7k HP instead of 6 to 7k HP, and the cooldown moved from 5 seconds to 10 seconds. With that being said, I still think Shirking Heels is a very unique and powerful perk. The frequency of Shirking Heels may have decreased, but not its efficacy. Our second armor perk is Invigorated. This is best in slot for tanks as it cuts Weaken, Disease, Exhaust, and Rend in half. These debuffs effectively strip us of our sustain, damage, stamina regeneration, and armor. Invigorated is a high value perk. And for our last armor perk, we have a Grit Ward. Remember, because of the 300 con node, basic attacks give us a grit. Grit Ward helps us mitigate damage while we are doing the thing we are best at, attacking. Grit Ward helps us trade favorably, stacks with our fortify effects, and decreases damage over time effects. Grit Ward also stacks with the hardened steel passive in the Warhammer Juggernaut tree, which gives us a total of 24% damage mitigation while we have grit on the Warhammer bar. For our shield, we are using the Mithril Tower Shield, which has accelerated resolve, sure footing, shield defense by default, and sturdy fortification. We are going with the accelerated resolve perk on our tower shield, as it gives us a whopping 35% haste and a 14% boost to incoming healing for 6 seconds. This effectively gives Defender's Resolve 2 additional abilities. When we need a speed boost, we can pop Defender's Resolve to close the distance or to escape in a pinch while consuming our pots. Stacked with our Heartrune, we can easily go from Death's Door back to full HP. Accelerated Resolve has saved me more times than I can count. Our next shield perk is Sure Footing. When combined with the mobility passive in the Swordmaster tree, we have a 63% increase in movement speed while blocking. This is important because it allows us to capitalize on the defensive formation passive, which is a 30% flat damage reduction to all damage for ourselves and allies within its radius. This is very powerful as we can provide DR to allies on point, in clumps, or while on the move. This newfound mobility allows us to close the distance with our guard up or retreat to safety. In 1vx scenarios, we can avoid stamina breaking heavy attacks from melee along with range attacks while never exposing our back. Shield defense is a great source of additional damage reduction. This was brought to us in the expansion and is intrinsic on tower shields. Our last shield perk is Sturdy Fortification. When combined with the defensive training passive in the Defender tree, we get a huge 45% fortify boost just for blocking 5 attacks. This allows us to drop our shield to close the distance against range or trade favorably against melee. For weapons, we are going with the Mithril Longsword and Warhammer of the Soldier. For our sword, we are taking Refreshing Move, Frost Attunement, and Thwarting Strikes. Refreshing Move combos with Thwarting Strikes and the 300 con node that gives us grit, as we can auto-attack often and reduce our ability cooldowns. Attunement perks are still some of the best damage perks as they are non-conditional. With this sword, we can stay aggressive, output great damage, and get our cooldowns back faster. Consistency is king here. On our Warhammer, we are going with Frost Attunement, Trenchant Recovery, and Sundering Clear Out. If you are a returning player, you will notice that this is no longer Repulsing Clear Out. As fun as that perk was, the change to Sundering Clear Out was a no-brainer, as it is the highest form of rend we can get as a weapon perk for the hammer. We chose Trenchant Recovery for the sustain, as we are hitting heavy attacks often. We slotted 2 different elemental jaspers in our weapons in the form of Retaliate, so that dots could coexist for more damage. Remember, dots help recharge our Heartrunes faster. For our Heartrune, we are going with the Stalwart Heartrune of Stoneform. This Heartrune embodies the spirit of this build, as it turns us into an unstoppable juggernaut, coating us in fortified stone as we gain health, fortify, and CC immunity. With a healing heart from our Keratin Earring and boost from Ankh, Stoneform becomes that much more powerful. On to jewelry. For our amulet, we are going with the all-powerful artifact, Ankh. The unique Center of Attention perk gives us a 25% boost to incoming healing, but decreases our outgoing healing and consumables. The 25% boost to incoming healing far outweighs the nerfs to consumables, as Ankh boosts anything with self-healing involved. Ankh boosts the heals from Defender's Resolve, our Heartrune, Trenchant Recovery on our hammer, Leeching on our ring, Healthy Toast, Healing Heart, and Regenerating on our earring, Prevailing Spirit in the Warhammer Crowd Crusher tree, and of course, Shirking Heals. The unique perk on Ankh also stacks multiplicatively with Divine and Recuperation from the Sword tree. This artifact has been a very strong addition to the build. For our ring, we are going with a Privateer's Heirloom. With the normalization of dodges across all weight classes in the expansion, Hardy is even more of a mandatory perk, as it gives us a 3rd dodge if needed. Leeching gives us more sustain while we are attacking on both weapons, and I chose slash damage, as sword attacks are our most consistent form of damage. And finally, our last jewelry piece, the Keratin Earring. I chose Healthy Toast, as it turns mana pots into mini health potions every 10 to 12 seconds. Healing Heart gives us a hefty surge in healing when we pop our Heartrune, and Regenerating is basically a regen potion on a stick. When combined with Ankh, this earring is the epitome of sustain. At the end of the day, I chose these armor perks as they are relevant all the time. We are proactive about our defensive abilities, so we do not need to worry about what damage type the enemy has. Grit Ward will keep damage mitigated while we are on the offensive. We will stay invigorated to keep debuff durations at bay, and always have Shirking Heals in our back pocket for when we need the extra sustain. We will rely on the rest of our kit and combat knowledge to fight specific opponents and team compositions. And lastly, we arrive at gems. We are running full onyxes on our armor, as we are fighting melee most of the time and want to cover all the physical damage types across various game modes. For elemental resistance, we have 3 opals in our jewelry. Since magic attacks do little stamina damage versus shields, we rely on our tower shield, various forms of sustain in our kit, and gemstone dust to help mitigate elemental damage. On to the final part of the build, the weapon skill trees. Before moving on to active abilities, let's go over the feel and overarching goals of each weapon. The Sword and Shield is all about the balance between offense and defense. The Swordmaster tree gives us a mix of Empower, a Cleanse, and mobility while blocking and landing critical hits, while the Defender tree bolsters our defenses with armor and elemental resistance passives, CC, Sustain, Fortify, and an AoE absorption. The Warhammer is a slow but powerful weapon that applies debuffs and AoE crowd control effects to our opponents. The Juggernaut tree offers a mix of armor penetration, rend, and empower, while the Crowd Crusher tree gives us sustain and CC in the form of stuns and knockdowns, with both sides offering cooldown reduction, debuff application with our abilities, and damage mitigation via armor and fortify effects. Our first active ability is Leaping Strike. This is the best gap closer in the game, as it is quick, staggers, and slows on impact. You can also turn slightly left or right while you are leaping, giving you some control during its trajectory. Leaping Strike is amazing at closing the gap, securing kills, but is also a great escape tool. When used on ledges or cliffs, you can travel very far. Leaping Strike is an amazing mobility tool. To the Defender side of the tree, we have our second active ability, Shield Bash. Shield Bash is the best stun in the game, as it is fast, has grit, and comes out in a wide arc in front of you, capable of hitting multiple opponents. What makes it so powerful is that you can activate it while you are blocking to safely punish your opponent. One of the best ways to use Shield Bash is to wait until your opponent is locked in an animation they can't dodge, block, or cancel out of, and punish those frames with a guaranteed Shield Bash stun. Defender's Resolve is our last active ability. This ability is synonymous with tanking, as it has damage mitigation, stamina damage reduction, sustain, and grit. With the accelerated resolve perk on our shield, we gain a huge 35% haste and 14% increase to all incoming healing. One of my favorite things to do when I'm being focused is to pop Defender's Resolve, consume all my pots, stone form, and watch my health go back to full. If you need the health from Resolve's Restoration passive right away, you can swap to your second weapon to immediately proc it. Talk about utility. Moving on to the Warhammer, we find ourselves on the Juggernaut tree, and our first active ability, Armor Breaker. This ability is self-explanatory and a must-have this season. With the buff and uptick in heavy armor and the release of the flail and shield, an ability with grit, 35% armor pen, and 30% rend for 10 seconds is just what we are looking for. This ability hits hard, fast, and does a lot of stamina damage against enemy shields. Onto the Crowd Crusher tree and our second active ability, Shockwave. Shockwave is a powerful 4-meter AoE stun that weakens and has grit. This ability has the fastest frames amongst our CC abilities and often catches opponents off guard. Shockwave is a great follow-up to Clear Out. When used at the right time, Shockwave can peel for your allies, halt the offensive momentum of your opponents, and can set you and your teammates up with big follow-up damage. Wrapping up the Warhammer, we have our final active ability in Clear Out. Clear Out is another powerful CC ability that knocks down all nearby enemies, inflicting a 25% rend with the Sundering Clear Out perk, while also fortifying ourselves and nearby allies for 4 seconds. Clear Out is also a great tool for peeling for your healers or DPS, and does a great job of knocking opponents off of ledges and cliffs. Let's wrap this build guide up with Playstyle, Combo, and Synergies. Playstyle is game mode dependent. I approach duels very differently from 3s, OPR, or open world PvP, and going over the differences would require a separate video. The combo, however, is what remains consistent. Whether you find an opening or create one, be sure to punish your opponent with a guaranteed shield bash. Remember to guarantee it by making sure your opponent is stammed out or by punishing them during a locked animation. Follow this up with Clear Out into Shockwave and with a heavy attack or Armor Breaker. Armor Breaker is usually guaranteed as it is faster than a fully charged heavy attack, so go with that if you're unsure if your opponent has any freedom, which would compromise the heavy attack after Shockwave. The rest of combat is up to you. Personally, in multiplayer game modes, I try to lock down and burst the DPS and healers, or peel for my own. Offense is the best defense. Despite having a tower shield, blocking should be used sparingly and strategically, as holding block does nothing to kill the enemy team. Everything in our kit works synergistically to keep us moving forward. Grit allows us to attack relentlessly, as only hard CCs can stop us. While attacking, we have damage mitigation with Grit Ward, and our armor keeps us safe from non-dot debuffs. Use Shield Bash into the combo for burst damage and use Leaping Strike with basic attacks to keep the pressure on and secure the kill. Basic attacks get our cooldowns back faster via Refreshing Move on Sword and passives on the Warhammer tree. Heavy attacks on both weapons empower us, so try to start out with a heavy attack and weave them in occasionally to maximize DPS. Heavy attacks with Sword also cleanse us of 1 debuff per heavy attack, which is great for dots. Our weapons are crafted to do great consistent damage and complement our combat style. Combined with our armor and slotted rune glass gems, we are made to be in the heat of battle, so be sure to be aggressive. The Unbreakable Shield. Our first line of defense is our tower shield, as blocking prevents damage, turns on defensive training, defensive formation, and multiple attacks will proc up to 5 stacks of sturdy fortification. Combining all this with Defender's Resolve makes us very tanky, as we will have 45% armor fortify, reduce our enemy's base attack damage by 30%, and decrease the stamina damage we take while holding block by 20%. With defensive formation, we proc a defensive aura that reduces all damage taken by 30%, which includes hits to our back and damage over time effects. Remember, we get a heal at the end of Defender's Resolve, or can force the heal by swapping to our second weapon. To maximize our healing, be sure to use any of our sustain while on the SNS bar, as Ankh stacks with recuperation, making the most out of Defender's Resolve, Accelerated Resolve, Stone Form, our pots, leeching, and shirking heals. Next is our mobility tools like Leaping Strike and Accelerated Resolve Haste, as these are not only great for closing the gap, but are amazing escape tools. Combining these with our CC abilities to lock opponents down increases our chances of escaping dire situations. Use Shirking Heals if you still need a quick heal once you've maximized your defense with the Tower Shield, or want to avoid having your stamina broken, as you can dodge even with a sliver of stamina. Stone Form should be our last resort, as it takes the longest to recharge, but is the most powerful healing effect we have, as it can easily recover half our health bar with a Healing Heart perk on our earring. Along with giving us HP, it cleanses us of all debuffs and frees us from CCs, allowing us to stay in the fight or retreat if needed. When all else fails, if your stamina is drained, skills and pots are on cooldown, and your back is against the wall, stand and fight. As basic attacks will turn on Grit Ward, heal us with our leeching effects, and also decrease our ability cooldowns while regenerating our stamina faster. Running away with our back turned, giving our opponents free critical hits and dying a coward is the worst way to go. As you can see, I'm very passionate about this build. It fulfills that unstoppable tank power fantasy I look for in games. High defense, high offense, and mobility are what make the Omni Tank. If you made it this far, I salute you. I worked hard on this build guide, so if you enjoyed it or learned something new, be sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe for more tanky content. Until next time, in Heavy we trust.